Good morning. During this month of Easter, we have been concentrating on the theme of resurrection, this peak experience wherein we self actualize, we rise to our Christ consciousness level of being. Many of us have experienced this state, but the trick is to maintain it because it enables us to continually rise above the fluctuations, unstable emotions, and turmoils of life. This is, of course, one of the metaphysical meanings of Jesus walking on water. Water often represents emotions. For example, the water signs of the zodiac are considered to be more emotional people. Because Jesus the Christ was fully developed as a conscious being, the Bible tells us that he walked on water. Symbolically, this means that Jesus, the Christ, was able to live or walk above the emotional upheavals and chaos of life that caused most people to sink. In fact, when others tried to walk on water in the Bible, they did sink because they didn't have faith in the process. So, how do we develop our consciousness so that we too can do that? Walk above life's upheavals and not drown in the sorrows, suffering, and chaos that we often attract. Jesus said many times and in many ways, "These things that I do, ye shall do also, and greater." All true spiritual teachers throughout history have tried to help us develop our Christ consciousness state so that we too can live evolved lives. In the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, Jesus says, "Look to the Christ within, who shall be formed in every one of you, as it is formed in me." In other words, we too can live this kind of uplifted, resurrected life. We too can manifest heaven on earth. That's the point. The great spiritual masters have not endeavored to have us worship them or form religions to deify them. They try to teach us to emulate them, to model ourselves after them, and to live as they have lived, in a state of love, harmony, unity, forgiveness, compassion, and purity, for our own sakes and for the world that we are a part of. The concept is actually rather simple, but doing it, living on a higher level of life, is not so easy given the way that Western society has programmed us. It takes great commitment, a change in thinking, and living in a completely new way. But it is so worth it. It allows us to enjoy life, to rise above our self inflicted problems, to manifest our good, and to help those around us, many of whom desperately need our help. So, how do we do this? Well, first and foremost, we must make the commitment to our higher selves, and we must honor that commitment or covenant. That formal commitment or covenant puts our consciousness on the right track, so to speak. No train ever got to its proper destination on the wrong track or going in the wrong direction. Perhaps when you're saying the Lord's Prayer in the morning and at night, you can pay special attention to the lines, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Heaven is that state of higher consciousness that we want to manifest on the earth plane in our daily life every minute. Secondly, we must train our mind and body to honor that covenant or commitment throughout the day. This can be done in a number of ways. I have found it useful to use things in the outer physical world as reminders. One of our members, David Kramer, sets his watch to go off every half hour to remind himself to say the Ho'oponopono prayer. Muslims stop everything they're doing and pray 5 times a day. Christians often give up something for Lent to remind themselves every time they don't indulge in that coffee, alcohol, coffee, sugar, or whatever they've given up. Buddhists, Taoists, and Hindus meditate and participate in daily rituals. All over India, for example, incense burns regularly in business places to remind the owners of their spiritual dedication. Before the communists took over Hong Kong, that was the case there too. You can use your daily shower as a purification ritual. Eating your meals can serve as a ritual to nourish your body temple. You can make rituals out of daily duties to remind yourself of your commitment. I know someone who neatly folds her napkin after every meal. This is a symbol of the resurrection of Jesus. The idea is based on the fact that after his resurrection in the tomb, Jesus carefully folded his linen facial burial cloth or napkin as a symbol of his resurrection. His other burial clothes were just thrown aside. That's why when two of his disciples entered the tomb, they knew that Jesus had resurrected. The Bible takes an entire verse to tell us that Jesus' facial burial napkin was neatly folded and placed at the head of his coffin before he left his tomb. The Hebrew tradition of the napkin had to do with the master and the servant, and every Jewish boy knew this. Jesus, of course, was Jewish. The Jewish tradition was that the master would eat and the servant would wait just out of sight until the master had finished his eating. The servant wouldn't dare touch that table until the master was completely finished. Now, when the master was through eating, he would rise from the table, wipe his mouth with that napkin, and toss it on the table. The servant would know to clear the table then. The wadded napkin meant, I'm done. But if the master got up from the table and neatly folded his napkin, it meant, I'm coming back. So the fact that this burial napkin that had covered Jesus' disappeared body or face in particular was neatly folded meant that the master had risen. He would come back to his people. This is just one example of something that has a lot of meaning that you could use to remind yourself of your resurrection at every meal. No one would know what you were doing, but it would remind you. I'm sure you can think of other ways of using the outer world as a reminder of your goal. I've been in a spiritual school where numbers were chosen periodically, and then every time this number popped up all day, it would wake us up to our goal. For example, take the number 33. Every time you see it on a car license plate, an address, on a menu price, a phone number, wherever and whatever, it can serve as a wake-up call that you have risen and that you are committed to your path. The point is, you can use many outer things to remind you of your inner commitment. I'm sure you've all heard about how cleaning the clutter out of your house can be used as an exercise to clean the clutter out of your mind, like judgment, negativity, old habits, for example. It's the same idea. Or you can do something as simple as writing your commitment on your hand, like my teenage students do. And every time you look down, you'll see it there. Bottom line, you can use all of life to help remind you that you have chosen to be one of the chosen ones. And remember, being one of God's chosen ones means that you have chosen to be a spiritually committed being. A third way you can further maintain your awareness of your resurrected Christ consciousness state is to wake up, as the Bible says so many times. This often involves being aware of and facing whatever is going on in you, whatever fears or problems you may have, and not just ignoring them or trying to escape from them. Wake up to what's going on. Be aware. Facing your problems helps you develop your inner strength, your spiritual muscles, so to speak, to overcome even bigger problems. It helps you become a spiritual warrior, like we've been talking about recently. The Old Testament, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, and many spiritual works talk about the importance of being a spiritual warrior and waging a battle against sinful civilizations and sinful people. These people or civilizations symbolize the parts of us that we need to wage an inner battle against. Those lower forces, fear, doubt, negativity, judgment, non-forgiveness, lack of love, etc. Most people feel overpowered or defeated by outer circumstances. So they try to escape their seeming problems or situations, which could help them grow and flourish if faced. Maybe they overdrink, overdrug, overeat, over entertain themselves, over blame others or the outside world for their problems as a way of avoiding them. The truth is that when we face our problems head on, we can usually grow from them and overcome them. We grow stronger when we face the dragon. We either defeat it or we find out that the dragon is just an illusion. Remember Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz? I actually didn't remember the details. I had to call someone, but I know you young people do. Dorothy faced the dragon, in her case, it was a witch, and then discovered that she had the power to return home all along. Her dragon was an illusion. Ours usually is too. Again, quoting the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, without a foe, a soldier never knows his strength. We think our problems are our foes, but when we face them, we overcome them, often by realizing that they are only problems because of our thinking, and that when we change our thinking, the problem vanishes. I love the way the story of David and Goliath illustrates this point, that what might seem like a giant problem, in this case a real giant, can be easily dealt with. Remember, everyone in both armies was terrified of this giant of a man, Goliath, yet it was a little shepherd boy, David, who defeated the giant with just a slingshot and pebbles. First, David had to accept his foe, face him. He had to squarely face the fact that this giant of a warrior had to be defeated. He was really there. He didn't run away from the problem. David didn't, like everyone else. Then David used his wisdom and inner resources, symbolized by the 5 pebbles that he had. And he stunned Goliath by slinging the pebbles into his forehead. The stunned Goliath temporarily fell down, and then David simply went over to him, pulled out Goliath's own sword, and cut off his head. That symbolizes what we all need to do. Face our problems head on, then figure out a simple strategy, usually changing our thinking, and then annihilate the problem. For example, maybe our foe is negativity. We need to face the fact that we are negative. We need to see that it is not the outside world or others that is the problem. It's our interpretation of the outer world and others. We need to then cut off the head of the problem by changing our thinking. And voila, we have defeated the enemy. We may feel like our outside problems are unsurmountable, maybe the government, a group of people, or some huge bully figure in our lives. But with a bit of resourcefulness like David's, we can totally conquer the situation. By just changing our thinking about the enemies being the cause of our negativity and stress, we will have conquered the problem. We don't have to conquer the outside government or a huge political party or a whole nation or some bully out there in our lives. That's hard, but we can change our thinking about them and see them differently, where they are not a problem any longer. The giant Goliath metaphysically represents all of our formidable foes like fear, insecurity, doubt, negativity. David represents our inner strength and wisdom. But how is this poor little shepherd boy David going to defeat this Goliath monster of a man? He did it with a few pebbles. Our pebbles are wisdom and a change in thinking. When we are brave enough to crucify our Goliaths, the lower era thoughts within us, maybe fear or negativity, we find a whole new life. Our Goliaths can be thoughts of lack or disharmony or limitation, for example. But then, if we are on the right track, a still small voice within will say, "Do not be afraid. You are no longer in the tomb." It's just like the Easter story. Jesus was no longer in the tomb that material man had put him in. He had risen to a higher level. Your inner Goliath is defeated by your inner David. The whole Old Testament is full of similar stories of good defeating bad. The defeated people and nations symbolize this good and bad. God continually destroyed them, crucified them, burned them up. It was absolutely gruesome, some of the things that God did. God is our higher self, continually destroying the lower nations and people in us. These lower thoughts of defeat. This can't be taken literally, of course. The small shepherd boy David defeated the giant Goliath. Good will always defeat evil in the end. The David and Goliath story and all the Old Testament stories of God defeating the sinful people symbolize that in our inner battles, our higher self can defeat the lower parts of us, the parts of us that prevent us from resurrecting. We bring on so much unnecessary suffering to ourselves and others when we don't wage the battle. The fourth step in maintaining our risen Christ consciousness is the way of the steward. Give. Give to others the testimony and wisdom that you have gained. This reinforces the experience you have had. Gurdjieff said that the only way to go up to a higher step on the spiritual ladder is to pull someone else up to occupy the rung of the ladder where we were before. That's a simple way to express a very esoteric truth about sharing, stewardship, and giving. The best way to do this, of course, is by your example, not proselytizing in words. Ram Dass once said that he tried for years to convert his father. Ram Dass's brilliant intellect, he was a well-known professor of psychology at Harvard, but his intellect just wasn't able to convince his father. Ram Dass said that as soon as he started being the teachings instead of just talking about them, his father was suddenly very interested in his truth. In the Easter story, Jesus, the Christ, resurrected and walked toward Galilee. Galilee spiritually symbolizes a high consciousness. That's what we want, to resurrect, to be born again on this higher level, and to go toward our Galilee, our higher consciousness. And modeling this way of life and helping others is a great way to stay risen. I understand from people in AA that one of the most effective ways to stay sober is to be a steward and give to others. In helping others, many AA sponsors find staying sober far easier. And the last and fifth way you can better assure your continued resurrection is through maintaining your close connection with what the Buddhists call the Sangha. Your Sangha is your group of spiritually committed companions. When one becomes a Buddhist, one commits to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha consciousness is basically the Christ consciousness or higher consciousness. The Dharma is the teachings that one commits to study and live by. The Sangha is the fellowship of others on your spiritual path. We all know the importance of remaining close with people of like mind if we are to grow spiritually. What's the old expression, sleep with dogs and you get fleas? Well, the opposite is true too. It's a psychological verity that our brain is very influenced by its surroundings. So it's essential that we spend as much time as possible with spiritually oriented people who positively reinforce us. This is particularly important in the West, where society has been on a spiritual decline. We are often influenced adversely in the media, where the gods of power and materialism have prevailed. Bottom line, our commitment to higher teachings and the higher path is not easy at Unity. It may well be one of the most difficult to follow because Unity does nothing for you except show you how to help yourself. You are required to do the work, to accept the responsibility to work out and maintain your own salvation or resurrection. As Emmett Fox said, our teaching is simple, but not easy, and there is a difference. Unity and New Thought are not crystallized formal theologies. It's not a dogma that we can follow. We cannot be saved or born again during a Sunday service and then not have to do anything else. Unity and New Thought teachings are simply a study of the principles about how to live a higher life than the masses choose. It takes a plan and commitment and some disciplined steps. So, try these 5 ways that can help you achieve and maintain your resurrection to a higher level of life. 1, formally commit to the path. 2, use life to help you remember your goal. Daily showers for purification, neatly folding your napkin at meals to symbolize your resurrection above worldly gods. 3, develop yourself as a spiritual warrior like David with Goliath. 4, be a good steward. Help others. Share your spiritual wisdom, mostly by being that wisdom. And 5, and last but not least, spend as much time as possible with your Sangha, the fellowship of others on your spiritual path. And when you say the Lord's Prayer every day, say it thoughtfully and concentrate on the line, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Resurrecting or manifesting heaven on earth is possible, and you certainly deserve it. Amen.